Good morning, guys. Pam, can you hear me back there?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. First of all, I want to go over something, and we've included some of our clerical staff here. So I'll go over that first, and then the clerical staff can be dismissed, so we don't hold them back for the rest of the safety meeting. But so last week on, I believe it was Monday? When we had Monday, we had an EOC drill, which is Emergency Operations Center drill. And that drill was held at the district office, and we have those periodically, just to practice in the event of some emergency or crisis that would happen in our district. And it could affect our department. The scenario last Monday had to do with a fire in Trabuco Canyon, and it affected some of our school sites. Affected were Tesoro High School, Wagon Wheel, Chaparral. Eventually the scenario kind of evolved, and Chaparral needed to be evacuated. At first we were looking at Tesoro and Wagon Wheel, but the way that the fire started moving and the smoke started moving, the authorities decided you need to evacuate that school site. So the way it affects our department, and almost always in these scenarios, transportation is involved in some degree. Obviously for us, there's 700-800 people at Chaparral that needed to be moved out and brought to a reunification site, which in this case it involved Rancho Santa Margarita Water District. That was the place that they found that they could take students and staff to, where they could reunify with parents. The reason why I wanted to talk about it with all of you guys, including our clerical staff, is that in the event that that happens, the communication that goes back and forth between the district office, between here, our mainline phones, and our dispatch phones, it's important that we have kind of an understanding of how we would want to handle something like that if it were to occur. First of all, what it means for our staff that's inside the office, the administrative staff, that includes our dispatch team, instructors, and our clerical staff, it pretty much means all hands on deck, and it means that all of our other work becomes secondary at that point. Now we'll have to put off anything that we're doing, and our attention needs to be on that. If we have phone calls coming in, we would have to support each other as far as the communication that's coming in, because we'll get phone calls from parents and possibly even from site staff. Sometimes I will be in communication with someone in dispatch, but I'll need to call another line because that line is tied up, and I'll need to rely on anybody that answers any of the phone lines here in the department. The other thing that could occur is that we could have a crisis or a situation here at this location, at this site. And one of the things that's really important is for us to be able to communicate with everybody that's here. All of the employees that report to this location. Remember that this location opens very early and stays open later as well. So we have employees coming and going. Not always are staff on site, and something could be happening here before you arrive to work, before you report here. And in cases like that, we need to be able to communicate with our employees. We have an alert system that we can use to send out a text alert to all of our staff, but that only works if we have current and updated information regarding your cell phone numbers. So one of the things we're going to do today is we're going to pass out this form and make sure we have current and updated phone numbers for you. I want to kind of give you an idea of the kind of messages you could receive on your text message in the event of an emergency at this site. There could be a number of scenarios, but we have kind of some standard ways of communicating things to you. So there could be a message that you receive that says, shelter in place. That means don't go outside, right? But let's say you get that message, shelter in place, and you're on your way to the facility. What do you think the best thing would be if you receive a shelter in place message and you're not here? Don't come. Right? Don't come. Probably the best thing is to just stage wherever you are. You know, maybe find a commercial parking lot and stage there if you're in a bus. If you're in your private vehicle, just find a place to wait. And I wouldn't necessarily say go home, turn around and go home if you're coming into work. Just wait. And you're going to receive another message at some point that tells you all clear, right? There's another message you could receive that is kind of one of our standard messages that we use now. It'll say, run, hide, fight, okay? And there's a reason why it's in that order. Because you choose those things in that order. The first thing to do would be run. Means vacate, get out of here, leave the premises, do whatever you can to vacate the premises, right? And our environment here is a little interesting because you know, we're kind of tucked away over here in a corner. And if we needed to leave, if we needed to run, it's probably not the best idea to get in your cars in a situation like that to get out. Because if everybody tries to do that at the same time, that's going to be a little difficult for us, right? Not to say that that's not something we would do, but every scenario could be a little different, and we're going to have to use some discretion depending on the situation. But my suggestion, and of course this is only a suggestion, because if we had like an active shooter on location here, you know, you're just going to go in any direction you can to kind of seek shelter and get away from the situation. We have walls over here that, you know, if you really wanted to, you could jump over them. And in a situation like that, that might be something you're going to do. But you know, depending on where you are in the building. But one of the ways we could get out of here is just run down the road here and get out onto Liberty. Right? In a run, hide situation, the first thing you try to do is run. If that's not something that's going to be able to happen, then it's hide, right? If you're getting a message like that, that means that there's some danger on site and you need to look for a place where you're not going to be found. And then the last option, and it could be an option, that is to fight. That means if you are unable to run, if you're unable to hide, then you may need to defend yourself. And it's a little bit of a change on how law enforcement used to suggest you respond. But there's been a lot of cases, a lot of incidents where, you know, we just had one down here in Poway where somebody responded and did something to the shooter so that, you know, not only were they defending themselves, but it really mitigated the outcome. It could have been a lot worse if somebody didn't intervene, right? What is the actual appropriate response? Every situation is going to call for something different. But you want to be able to be alerted to it. And the nice thing about having cell phones now, it's one of the nice things, because there's a lot of other things that aren't so nice, and we're going to talk about those a little bit later. But one of the things is that we are able to receive instant messages. But, like I said, we need your current information. So we have these forms. We're going to pass them out right now.
I was going to put them in boxes.
Okay, we're going to put them in your boxes. Please return them to Stephanie. One of the things that's on there that's not included, and I would highly, highly suggest and request that you also provide your personal email address. The one that you use, if you use it on your phone, include that. Because the email address is something that we will always also use. The alert system that we have includes the ability to send you a text message and also an email. And you would receive both of those. And in some cases, emails would be our first choice depending on how much information we need to share with you. Because in a text message, it's limited how many characters we can send through this messaging system that's available to us. With an email, we could send much more information, okay? So, any questions regarding that portion? Because I'm going to address the drivers separately about the EOC, but anything that we talked about that had to do, that it would include all of us, all of our employees here on site. We're good? So if something pops up and you have a question about something, write it down, jot it down, and give it to Stephanie, and she'll make sure it gets my way, and then we'll talk about it. But it's something that at some point we're going to be doing a drill here, probably during this next month of May. One of the days we're going to do our own drill, and it's going to involve probably an evacuation, because we have a lot of new employees, and the last time we did this, a lot of people weren't here. So we're going to determine a evacuation site in the event that there was a danger situation in here and we had to vacate the building. So, but we'll let you guys know the date ahead of time that we're going to do that drill. And then on that day, we'll try to choose a time where most people are here in the building. Kind of when the drivers are getting back from their routes. And there's a lot of people in the building, okay? All right, so our clerical staff can go back to their wonderful work. Thank you for attending that portion. When it has to do with an EOC and it involves a situation like what we did on Monday, which is a evacuation, what do you think in that case we need a lot of at the school, right? We need a lot of buses, preferably large buses, and we need them there fairly quickly. Right? So I want to talk about a scenario where maybe we get a request like this, and let's say it's like 10:30 in the morning. Where are many of you at 10:30 in the morning?
Break.
You're on your split, right? Some of you may be hanging around here, some of you may not. Some of you may be at a local establishment here, a reputable one. But you're here, maybe in the vicinity, maybe not so close, but we need, all of a sudden, let's say we need 40 buses at Chaparral, okay? What we're going to do is we're going to send a mass message out to you, letting you know that you need to report immediately to transportation, that there is an emergency, that we need to evacuate a school, and we need all licensed bus drivers to report back to transportation. When you would get a message like that, what do you think is expected of you? Pretty much drop everything, whatever it is you're doing, and get here. Yes, you have a question or comment?
Would you have to do a pre-trip on the airplane?
I'm going to get to that right there.
Okay.
That's a good point. That's the next point. So this is a crisis situation, emergency situation, and the most important thing is urgency, right? So here's what we would ask you to do. You report here immediately. Dispatch is going to be working. Maybe if you don't normally drive a big bus, if you normally drive a big bus and you have one assigned to you, you're going to go to that one and you're going to get going and you're going to be the first ones to report. But if you don't normally drive a big bus, you're going to have to communicate with dispatch. They're going to be giving you, there's more than likely there's going to be a supervisor in there assisting, and they're going to be giving you a bus assignment. And here's what you do. You make sure that bus starts up, right? You do a quick visual inspection, and then you're on your way to whatever location you've been directed to go to. In most scenarios, you're going to be asked to stage at a location, because not all the buses are going to be able to get into that loading zone at the same time. So when you're staging in that location, that would be a good time to do the best job you can to pre-trip your bus. There may be cases where you don't have time. And in that case, the most important thing becomes evacuating the school and picking up those kids. What's the reason we do the pre-trip every morning? Safety, right? Because of the well-being of the students and our passengers. So at that moment in time, The best thing we can do for the safety of our passengers that happen to be at the school site is to get there as quickly as we can. It's going to be an exception to the rule, and I guarantee you that no law enforcement or CHP officer is going to ding you because you didn't do the pre-trip that you do normally every day. I would make sure on your way over there that your brakes are working the way they should be, right? Do some brake checks on your way over there, physical brake checks. But other than that, maybe watch your gauges as you're driving over there and making sure the air is building up and everything is good. Other than that, you want to make sure you're there and you're ready to get those kids. But it's critical that we have your contact information. It's so important that we have that, because we're going to need as much help as we can get. Most of our school sites cannot be evacuated by just the big bus drivers that we have on their routes. So we're going to need assistance. And at the same time, if it's a high school, you can be sure that we're asking OCTA, we're asking Saddleback, the first student contractor there, we're asking Durham, the contractor that helps with Laguna, we're asking Newport Beach, we're asking for their assistance as well. Because at a high school, you got 4,000 plus people that you need to get out of there. If that's the case, if you're evacuating a site. When you are out there and you are picking up students in the event of evacuation, you pick up those kids, you load up your kids, and you're doing 3 to a seat as much as you can. You're trying to fill your bus to capacity, and it's not going to be the ideal 3 to a seat, because maybe you're picking up middle schoolers and you would never do that on a regular run. But on this day, you want to use every seat that you can, and it could mean that your aisle is a little bit crowded and it's not as clear as you would normally want it. But this is a crisis situation, so things change up a little bit. When you arrive to the reunification location, whatever that may be, it could be another high school, it could be a church. What we want and we ask from you, we don't ask a lot other than, safely get there. You don't have to fill out a lot of paperwork or anything, but it's important that you take a head count as those students are disembarking. Because that's what we're going to need to know. We're going to need to know how many people exactly we evacuated on the bus and brought them to that location. That's the number they're going to be asking me. So if you had 76, you report to dispatch. 76 students got dropped off at the church. And if you do another round and you pick up a group of kids and you have 43, you're going to report 43 students. So as those kids are getting off the bus, you are taking and making a note of that. And make a note of it, because you may not be able to get into dispatch right away, but at some point or another you may be asked how many kids or passengers, because you're going to have some adults likely on your bus too, how many passengers you brought to the unification spot. So please fill out those forms, give us your information so that we can be ready in the event of a crisis. And the district realizes how much they rely on us in a situation like this. I have not had one drill that did not involve transportation to some degree, in some way or another. And even if we ended up not removing those kids, they wanted the buses there ready in case ultimately an evacuation is necessary. Another thing that we can use this messaging system for is if a school is in lockdown or shelter in place, we want to be able to get that information out to you, and it's a lot easier to do it through the two-way messaging system than it is to do it through the radio. So we would be able to get you that information out there as soon as we receive it, to let you know that site, you're not going to go to it right now because it's in shelter in place. And there aren't going to be students to pick up, and you wouldn't be able to drop off students there either. And that happens actually quite often, where we have a location that is going through some sort of situation, and law enforcement has placed it in a shelter in place kind of situation. And then we want to know if that's happening, so that we don't arrive there with our bus either full of kids or with our bus ready to pick kids up. Okay, any more questions on the EOC portion? Yes?
Yeah, just a question about the text message as a way of identifying that you shouldn't go to a school. I usually ignore text messages while I'm driving.
Yeah, and that's a good point. So one of the things that we have, and we haven't used it to its full capacity, is the tablet to send a two-way message. So the tablet is one way that we would send a two-way message, and you would notice it if it came up on the tablet. But we also want to have some redundancy, so we would still use your phone number. So we would send it via the tablet and the phone number, just in case maybe you had stepped out of your bus, you know, you're in the middle of a break. So you may not receive it while you're driving, the text message, but we're gonna, if you're driving and you have a tablet in your bus, we're gonna attempt to use that as a way to let you know that something's shelter in place. And of course, we'll do it over the radio too. So we're going to use everything that's at our disposal to try to get you the message. Okay, so I see this little thing up here, and I always love those things. Those of us that never ever stop, we keep going. But that's I understand. I remember when I used to look at that board too. So something that happens when you start to look at the finish line, so to speak. What do you think happens to us? Just human nature. So you start to like focus on the end, and it's okay to do that. But if you're thinking too much about that, or that's your mindset in general, what happens is that sometimes you miss what's right here in front of you, and it could be easier to take shortcuts, or just not be right on it like you were maybe at the beginning of the school year after we had orientation and we went over all these things and regulations, and you know, that's just normal. It's normal human response. So I'm going to talk about just a few things here, 3 things that, and there's much more, but this is going to kind of hopefully bring it home as far as how important it is for you to make sure you're not missing things. It's critical, and missing things can prove to be disastrous. I love that chair that Luis is sitting in back there. He's like in the lawn chair. He's relaxing back there. Okay, so when you are driving your bus, throughout the day, there's going to be time and again when you need to secure your bus, right? And there's different adaptations to the meaning of securing your bus, okay? And we're going to talk about those. If you are driving a special needs vehicle, right? Whether it's one of our CNGs, our lovely John Deere CNGs that we love, I love the ones, or a cutaway van special ed bus, or if you happen to pick up a special needs bus on a big bus, right? Especially if you're in one of those vans and you're doing multiple stops, you're going to pick up kid after kid after kid, or in the afternoon dropping one after another. Every time you arrive at a residence to either pick up or drop off that student, you need to secure your bus. There's a different way to secure your bus if you're going to leave the driver's compartment. There's another way to secure your bus when you're sitting still in the driver's seat. But the bus still needs to be secure when you're loading or unloading. Right? So how do you secure your bus when you're loading and unloading and you do not have to leave your seat?
Parking brake.
Neutral.
Drive.
Put it in drive.
Sure you do.
I can tell you time and again what has happened, and in some cases it's been tragic, when somebody does not secure their bus appropriately when they're loading and unloading, even though they didn't leave their seat. Okay? If you're in a big bus, Absolutely, you need to pull your spring brake, right? Your parking brake every time. And before you do that, you put it in neutral. You don't just pull your parking brake and everything's good, right? If it's still in gear, you haven't secured it. Small bus, what do?
Park.
And put the brake.
Park,
Park, break.
and your foot's on the brake, and you put it in park. Too often, in the small buses, a driver will arrive to the student's house, and it's something that, yeah, we're in a hurry, we gotta get going. You don't just put your foot on the brake. I mean, it sounds kind of ridiculous that we have to say this, but the reason why we have to say it is because it happens. So it's not sufficient to arrive there, open your doors with your foot on the brake, and allow the student to board the bus. That is not securing your vehicle while you're loading and unloading. And that is something that if you're not careful, it could become a habit, and a very dangerous habit. Right? All kinds of things could happen. But what I've seen, and I've seen video footage of it, it's really, really scary. Something happens while you're loading those students or you're dropping them off that distracts you for a second, and you want to respond to it, and you remove yourself from the driver's compartment, including your foot off the brake, and then you made a bad situation probably much worse. And that would be completely indefensible, right? How do you defend that? That's just being lazy, right? That's taking a shortcut. Maybe in your personal vehicle, that's something that you swing by, hey, come on, you stop and you pick somebody up. But in your school bus, never ever do that. Never pick somebody else up or drop them off if you haven't put it in park or in a big bus, neutral and park brake. Okay? We're clear on securing our bus when we're loading and unloading, right? So there's the other securing the bus. And that's when you are leaving the driver's compartment. When you're leaving the driver's compartment, what does securing your bus include?
Take the key.
It includes,
Take the key.
it includes doing what we already said, neutral, right? Park brake, or put it in gear if you're in a small bus. And in this case, you're going to turn the engine off and you're going to remove the key. That's something you do every time you leave the driver's compartment. You can't skip a step. The step that is sometimes missed is leaving the bus on or leaving the keys in the ignition, and you haven't secured the bus if you have missed that step. If you have a bad habit of not securing your bus in other occasions, then what could happen is you do some of the steps, but you don't do another one. And if you're in a big bus and you do not use your park brake, you're going to have a problem. Almost every instance when we are securing our bus, the bus is not on an exactly level plane. And if you do not set that brake, that parking brake, it's going to roll and you could cause somebody's injury, somebody's death. If nothing else, property damage is very excessive. And it's all about following the steps, right? Don't miss a step in the procedure of securing your bus. Yes?
And then leave the lights on for the child check if you're gonna do it within that 10 minutes.
Of course,
or
of course.
whatever.
If you follow the procedure every time, right, it becomes something that you never miss. If you do it every time, it's going to be very unlikely that you miss that anytime you are leaving the driver's compartment. It has to become something second nature, right? That you do it every time. All right, so next thing. We are out there, and we're out there on the road, and all kinds of stuff happens. Sometimes we're doubling up, sometimes we're running shorthanded, and we have to help each other out, and we're talking with dispatch, we're talking to other drivers, and you guys do an excellent job at figuring things out and getting the job done every day. So that's something to be commended. I think we do an excellent job of working together. But we have to remember that whenever we're going to do something that is a departure from our normal route, whether it's going in a different direction that we don't normally go by because maybe there's some construction, or whether it's we are assisting another driver with another student, whatever it is that makes sense, and it may make total sense, what do we have to do whenever we're going to do something like that? We have to communicate. And communicate doesn't mean communicate with ourselves, right? And it's not enough to just communicate with another driver. You've got to let people over here know. Dispatch, at the very least, needs to know. If it's a stickier situation, you're going to want to make sure that either dispatch or yourself has communicated with a supervisor. Okay? It's so important. When we don't do that, and then a question comes up about a particular student or a particular vehicle, and nobody over here was informed, then things start getting a little hairy. Okay? Especially when it involves students. We have to have 100% transparency as a department about what's happening out there. Right? We trust you guys. We believe that many and most of your suggestions are legitimate and maybe very, very good suggestions, but we need to know. We need to know what you're doing if it's something different. Okay? Does everybody understand that? Yeah? Okay. We talked about cell phones before, right? And how much of a benefit and advantage they have become. We created a tool that's really helped us out in many ways. But they also are something that we are so attached to now that they could become something that we paying attention more to this than to the other activity that we are involved in. And if the activity that we're involved in is driving, then that could become a huge liability. Now, let's talk about when and how it would be appropriate for you to pick up your cell phone and look at it or use it while you're in a school bus. When is the only time do you think that you'll be able to use a cell phone when you're in a school bus? What would you have had to do before you actually pick it up and use it?
Turn it on. The engine stops.
Secure the bus.
The bus would have to have been secure, and it'd have to be in a safe location, off of the roadway, before you use your cell phone. Because it could be that there's a legitimate reason for you to use your cell phone. Maybe all of a sudden you're not feeling good, and it is imperative that you reach somebody, and maybe the best way to do it is not via the radio, and it's something that you would prefer to do talking to somebody personally on a landline. But you have to pull over, find a safe place to do that, and then use your phone. If there's a crisis and emergency situation, the vehicle code allows us to use a cell phone in an emergency situation. If it's in the course of your work, even a school bus driver could use the cell phone. Let's say that for some reason the radio towers or the towers that we're using for our radios are not working. And the only way that dispatch can get a hold of you is via your cell phone. And it's a crisis situation. Not ideal, but communication is critical in those cases, and that may be the only way you can communicate. Those are the only two ways that you use a cell phone on the bus legally. One of them is while you're not driving and you're off the roadway, and the other one is because it's an emergency. What about if you get to an intersection and you're stopped and the light's red?
No.
Can you use your cell phone then? No. What about if all of a sudden it buzzes and all you want to do is look at it. Just to see who it was, or maybe what they said. You're not going to respond, but you're just going to look. Not okay. And that last scenario is probably the one that's most tempting, and it's the one that sometimes when we will fall to that temptation to look, to glance. If you want to do that in your personal vehicle, I highly suggest against it, but if you want to do that in your personal vehicle, you're running the risk of, first of all, being stopped and getting an infraction, or something worse, right? A real bad accident. All it takes is a glance for a moment, and is that something that's going to be able to be, is defensible, do you think? It isn't. So we want to remember that the use of this wireless device that in our personal lives can be something that's very useful while we're driving and in the course of our route. It's not something that we can be using. We can't look at it. We can't use it. So be extremely, extremely cautious and careful. Think twice before you're going to do something like this, because maybe 99 times out of 100 nobody finds out and nobody knows, but that one time, if we find out, it's going to be pretty bad, right? Especially if something happens because of that. Did I see a hand up there?
Carlos, I have a question.
Yeah.
He is telling us not to use the cell phone when we're in the bus. What happened when the dispatcher just send the left right into your cell phone? To
Send
look
the
at
what?
it. Left right. The left right to send it into your phone to look at it, to deliver it, or cover a different route. How do you do that?
So you're saying that you have received via your cell phone left rights?
Yes.
So that's a conversation to have, and you know, I this is the first time hearing about it. I didn't know that was happening. That's something we should avoid. Through a cell phone, left rights, not okay, because it's just the display is not appropriate for that. The way to get you left rights is through a school site, and I know sometimes that's not convenient. But, you know, we need to either email them to the office manager and then have them print them out and get them to you that way. The other thing is if you're getting maybe just one address, the tablets will actually give you the directions to one location, to one address. It has the ability to give you a navigation to that one location. If you have a cell phone that has audible directions, okay, and when you are pulled over and at a safe location, when you're not on the roadway, you can enter that address and it's going to be giving you the audible directions. That's appropriate. That's okay. The hands-free section of that cell phone that you're not using it to have a conversation and you're not looking at it and you don't have it in your hand, then you can use it that way. But if
We
you
can use the ear thing?
you could use the ear thing as long as it's not both ears.
No, I didn't understand that.
The audible portion of that device that gives you directions is, okay, we're working on getting the tablets to be able to do that with all of our routes, but it's really been difficult to find a routing company that is going to give us the directions that we need, because we need customized directions, not the ones that are on the Garmin database or the Google Maps database. That's why it's really hard, because ours are customized. But if you're going to one spot, right, that's an appropriate use of the device. Now, I do not think it's appropriate for you to be looking at your phone with left rights, to be going from one spot to the next spot to the next spot. And that's for two reasons. That screen is not appropriate for that. It's too small. And two, what is the motoring public going to think when they see you like this and you're driving? All they're going to assume is that you're using your cell phone inappropriately. And it probably is inappropriate, because even though we could probably defend it because it's in the course of your work, it's not smart to do that. Okay? So we'll talk about that. We'll have conversations with dispatch and see how we can avoid doing something like that and using other means to get you guys information. Okay? Okay, very good. Thank you so much for your attention. Please remember these last weeks, they're just as important and just as critical as any other week, right? So let's make sure that we stay on top of it. And please make sure you get those forms back to Stephanie, okay?